Hello, my name's Mike Ostler. I'm a local historian here in Thurrock, but one of the most interesting heritage projects I'm connected with is the Bata complex at East Tilbury. How did the British Bata Company come about to be established in East Tilbury? Well, that's a very good question. The Bata shoe concern itself started in Czechoslovakia in the early 1900s. After the First World War, they started making massive new developments around the world, and there was a great expansion of the shoe industry. Mr. Bata at the time, Thomas Bata, had a slogan, "Shoemaker to the world," and he decided that most of Africa actually didn't have a shoe, didn't know what shoes were. And so he put out large signs of pictures of shoes and the word Bata. And to this day, if you go to Africa and speak one of several languages, the word for shoe is in fact Bata, B-A-T-A. And they don't associate it with the company that makes them. As far as the Africans are concerned, the Bata is a shoe. So that's important. Mr. Bata decided that he wanted to have all over Europe, particularly, production plants and massive retail organisations, and then he could work outwards from there around what used to be the old empires of the European towns. So in the 1930s, they started looking for a site in the UK. And in 1932, they signed a contract to build an industrial village, that is a plant, a factory for construction and the making of the shoe, plus associated housing around the factory area for the workers. Not all the workers, but several hundred workers could live very close by. The site was literally a greenfield site. It was the old farm, and Farmer Wilson wanted to sell up, but early 30s, depression, the farming industry was not doing very well, so Mr. Wilson, I think, wanted to move, and he sold the site to the Bata Company. In 1933, the actual construction was apace. It started with the first large block at the factory and the adjacent road of houses, and they were very, very close to the original designs that were already in use in Zlin in the, as was then, Czechoslovakia. The first team came from Zlin to train local people in the running of the factory. That was in 1933. By July 33, they were actually producing shoes on the first line. Mr. Bata, having checked up on Henry Ford's methods of building cars on a production line, adapted that so that his shoe business was really economical with resources. So the first question really is, how did British Bata come to be established in East Tilbury? And that really is it. It was part of a much wider global plan of expansion. Now, the next question we should look at is, why did it close in 2006? Well, it closed in 2006 because the central head office for it, which was at that time in Canada, decided that they were winding down. They wanted to move the production closer to their largest customers. And by 2006, the largest demand for their product was in fact in Africa, India, Australasia. And so they were producing in Europe and then having to do all this transiting out with their goods. So they moved most of their production facilities out to the Middle and Far East, which meant that the European factories, for the most part, were in fact all shut down, a rolling programme, and the one in East Tilbury shut down in 2006. What sort of legacy? Well, it's left a very interesting fragment of early 20th century thinking about having industrial villages or industrial towns in some cases built around one industry. It leaves a hole in the local economics when the said industry folds. But in Tilbury, East Tilbury, the housing is still well used. In fact, other developers have crept around and are extending East Tilbury's housing stock even more. The factory units are still in use, but not to produce shoes. The idea is now that the whole site was bought out by the big storage company and is running the larger buildings for archive or for any other purpose that people want to rent space. And there's a plethora of single-storey buildings, all ancillary to the big production buildings, and those can be used by any small firm that wants just a small space, either for storage or for production, or photographic studio, anything like that would be ideally suited, and they're all in there together. So that is working quite well. There is also a residue, if that's the right word, of old workers and their families who were living in the housing. And one or two still, because they had a right to buy and they bought the housing instead of renting it from Mr. Bata. And so there's a nucleus of, one might say, Bata families still around. And one of the things that came out of it is what is now called the Bata Heritage Centre in the East Tilbury Branch Library. It is a small but very robust museum which survived the fire a couple of years ago, which burnt out the library and the museum for that matter. But luckily, with some heritage funding and some very professional workers on the restoration process, we've managed to get 90% of the original material back available to display. So we said it closed in 2006. In fact, what happened to the material, to the production equipment from the factory? Well, the last production line was wrapped up, so to speak, crated up by the engineering team and was sent out to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. One of the engineers went out there, and I think he spent about 6 weeks commissioning the production run so that it could switch on and operate in Kuala Lumpur, and he did that and left them with 2 buttons, an on and an off button basically, and they are out now producing out there the last line of footwear that was the last line from East Tilbury. There is only one factory left. There is only one factory left in Europe. That is at Best in Holland, near Eindhoven, and they are producing heavy industrial boots and special, perhaps short runs rather than a massive thousands and thousands of plimsolls or anything like that. So it is completely different. So the legacy is worldwide. The legacy of things from East Tilbury have gone global.